Karalee Katsambanis is an accomplished Australian TV commentator, journalist, columnist, and media trainer. She has worked across Australia's mainstream TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, and online for the past 20 years. She's a mother of 3 children and a stepmother of 2 young adults. Her book, Stepparenting with Purpose, Everything You Want to Know, but We're Too Afraid to Ask, provides invaluable insight and advice to those beginning or already on their step-parenting journey.
First of all, I'm delighted to be here at this Rotary International's House of Friendships virtual special event for Path of Hope, whose vision is to break the cycle, as we all know, of family and domestic violence, and to provide safety and empowerment to the people that are having the courage to actually escape it. So, when someone makes the decision to escape from this cycle, they actually do so because they know deep down that they know what they are and they know what they've had to endure is just not right. Something inside them, no matter what their circumstances are, just says to them, this is not right. This is not how life is meant to be. This is not how I'm meant to be treated. However, perhaps the most difficult challenge for anyone, especially women, is to realize that you have to push yourself because no one else is going to do it for you. And that push can come from many triggers. It can come from a comment from your children. It can come from a memory. It can come from watching or seeing something or reading something. But at the end of the day, you're the one that really has to do it. So when Path of Hope CEO Rebecca Tolstoy AM asked me to speak tonight, I really was honoured because she is one woman who is what I call a woman's woman. And you really don't often find that. I mean, sure, every woman says how important it is to support other women, but do they? I mean, do the women whose friends get divorced still invite their single woman friend around for a dinner party? Or do they make an excuse such as, oh, it's odd numbers, or it would be very boring for you, and instead hide the fact that a sudden insecurity has cropped up, that now that their friend is single, they might look at their husband in a different way. So when you find women who really do support other women, you realize that they are the true role models because they are confident in themselves and their abilities, and they actually want to help others achieve their potential. And for the record, I am someone that has always invited my newly divorced friends around, so don't worry about that. So I said that women like Rebecca and her crew, her staff, they want to help others achieve their potential because everyone has potential. You know, part of the puzzle of life is actually realizing what that potential actually is. And it's the need for all women to really realize that the change in their lives has to begin with themselves. And they have to have the ability to believe in themselves in the first place, which is the key. Because you can have someone tell you your whole life what should be happening, but if you can't believe it yourself, then it isn't going to happen. So, luckily, my mum was able to break the cycle in her family, and she is now 85. I have 3 children. Once the youngest was out of the cot, instead of selling everything on Gumtree or eBay here in Australia, I made the decision to actually give away everything. The cot, the bath, the pram, loads of clothes, boxes of unopened nappies, extra bits and pieces that had been bought or given to us by well-meaning people that we were never going to use now that our family was complete. And I gave it to a women's refuge. The thought of someone haggling over an item for a few extra dollars and, perhaps casing out the house for a nefarious reason just didn't fill me with warm fuzzies. And I thought that this has seen us all through 3 kids, and there is nothing wrong with the stuff, and it will help someone in need. I grew up on hand-me-downs and secondhand clothes, and, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's there to help. Now, I knew full well that often the time that a woman escapes from a domestic violence situation that she's weighed up is often straight after pickup. And they pick up their children from school and they just drive straight to a refuge with very little items. And even though they may have thought to pack things, they're invariably going to forget things. So all the stuff that I was donating, I had in the back of my mind that this might actually help someone who'd forgotten to to pack basics. So, there were toothbrushes, soaps, bottles of baby shampoo, stuff that you just don't need anymore. So the ladies at the Women Refuge came to pick up everything. And I saw the look on the woman's face, and she said, "You could sell all of this. Why on earth are you giving it to us all?" And I repeated the story. And once it was loaded up, so I repeated and I said to her, "Look, I'd rather it help someone in need. They might, be scrabbling. They might not have anything. If they get to your refuge and they've forgotten an extra baby grow or a pair of socks or a pair of bathers for the kids' swimming lesson the next day, it's all there." And then I said to her, if my maternal grandma had had the option to go to a refuge in the 1930s, not only her life, but the lives of my mum and her 3 siblings may have turned out completely differently. The lady looked at me. She was, all I can say is she was a very fierce looking woman. She had a mohawk. She had piercings all over the front of her face. She was rough and ready, and that was her protection shell for the world, almost like a hedgehog whose spines go up and then they're down. And she said to me and smiled, "Someone is going to get that start they need because of you." She legged it up into the truck in her jeans and t-shirt and Blundstone boots. And as she revved the engine, she said, "It's never too late to acknowledge anything. You've got to keep talking. And by talking, you can change behaviours. That story of your grandma, it's not that uncommon, but what is uncommon is actually the fact you told me. And it's 90 years later, and it's still going on in society today." So I want to share with you. My grandfather was a very well-known man in Perth, very educated. He was what they would term today a high-functioning alcoholic. I've diagnosed that. It all stacks up. My mum still struggles to admit this, but she's told me tales of being on the tram on St George's Terrace in Perth, coming back from Perth Modern School, which, for those of you internationally, it's produced a couple of prime ministers. It's a selectively academic, selective entry school. Back when my mum sat the exam, there was no allowance if you were sick on the day or anything. It took the 2 top students from around the state of Western Australia and sent them there. So anyway, she told me tales of being on the tram when she was coming back from Perth Modern, and her dad would be on it, and she would hide down behind the seats as he was inebriated. He was a giggling drunk at that stage. She has blocked a lot out. And at Perth Modern reunion about a decade ago, someone came up to her and they were reminiscing on photos and things. And because their brother had gone to the school where my grandfather was a senior master, I'm not going to actually say what his name was, they said, "Oh yes, Mr. Brown, he loved a beer." And it was there that she found out at the age of 75 that her dad drank at lunchtime, as well as the 6 p.m. swill. Now, I am so sad, and I am holding back the tears tonight, but I was tearing up when I wrote this speech. I'm sad because she actually hasn't attended another Perth Modern reunion, even though she helped write the 100-year book of the history called The Sphinx, because she is embarrassed. And I think in her mind, she doesn't think of all this in other words. Everyone would have known at the time what her domestic family situation was like, because there was yelling and shouting and screaming. But in those days, of course, no one said a word. And, I sort of said to my mum, given the age you are, the fellow that came up and said it, he would have just said it in passing. No one's going to judge you for it. But she's 85 now. And as I said, you haven't got many reunions left. And she has a giggle and she says, "I know." But look, she's not at the stage to go yet. My mum rarely drinks. I don't drink, apart from maybe a mouthful of champagne at a wedding or a baptism. I think subconsciously because of the worry that, is it in the genes? Is it in her genes? She told me some stories that one day her mum took her and her 2 sisters and her brother into the back garden and asked them whether they should give their dad another chance, as he'd promised not to drink anymore. My mum was 11 at the time, her brother was 13, her sisters were 9 and 5. And she was the only one who said, "Yes, we should give dad another chance." And of course, the situation soon went back to how it was. My mum got into University of Western Australia in the 40s, and apparently her dad, she was the only one that went on to higher study, that did the leaving. And her dad had promised her a little stipend or an allowance, but she knew there and then that she would never get it. So she made the choice to go to Stotts Business College, and she won a scholarship over to England. Now, I say to my mum, I hope you don't blame yourself. I said, because that was an adult issue that your mum asked of 4 young kids. And it's funny, she looked at me, and at the point she told me this, it's only a few years ago, I realised that for 85 years, she had indeed blamed herself deep down. She said to me, well, 3 of them said, no, we should, move or let him go. And she said, because I said yes, my mum had to stay. She then, she followed up with all the good things, but it resulted in 3 of them, one of her sisters and brother, all 3 of them headed off and lived overseas as soon as they could. One remained in Perth, when they were adults. As I said, my mum went overseas, and she said her sole reason was to make a lot of money so that she could afford to help her mum and send money back. Now, back in those days in the 1930s, it doesn't matter what people say, it doesn't matter how women's lib or feminist or empowered we might be, but in the 1930s, a woman with 4 kids being divorced, it really did not happen. You hear stories in the 50s and 60s of the court lists of people that were getting divorced and the shame and everything that went on, and that was pretty rare. My grandma had apparently been a nurse, a nursing sister. She wore, I've seen the photos with the starched white uniform and the pinafore uniform. And, she helped soldiers that had come back from the war. Now, my mum tells me that her mum back then told her not to get married before the age of 25 and go and see the world. But I've now made my mum see that the reason her mum told her that was that her mum knew that the domestic situation that she found herself in was wrong, and she didn't want her children to be caught in the same cycle. And I sort of contrast it to my husband's upbringing with his family. It's a Greek-Australian family where if you're not married by the age of 25 back then, you were considered old. It was to have a family. And I said to my mum, if there was no love in your domestic situation, you've got no reference point. And so she's sort of like, she's trying to unpack all this at the moment. So look, her mum encouraged her to pursue education and a career, which she did. And my mum encouraged me to as well. Just like her mum had been the nurse who had to give it all up. When I was born, there was no family support overseas. My mum married my dad, but they divorced when I was a teenager, very respectfully. She'd unknowingly repeated certain behaviours. Now, let me make this clear. My dad was not an alcoholic at all. He didn't drink, but he was fairly controlling, much like my mum's dad had been. We've worked it out that my dad was controlling because, very sadly, his dad had died when he was 11, and he had to raise his sister, who was 9 at the time, and his mum. With the best will in the world, it just didn't work for them. My mum then found out that her dad's dad had left his family when he was 11. So, talk about history repeating itself on the other side of the world. So I guess as 11-year-olds, they become quite empowered and controlling with their situations. And especially as men back in those days, everything is in their name. They control the money, they control everything, financial freedom. My mum remembers me asking both my mum and dad when I was 5, why aren't you getting divorced? Now, how would I have known what that name was? I can honestly tell you when I was at school, no one was divorced. Now, I have no memory of that, but I do have memories of the arguments that were in my childhood. It's just one of those things. Perhaps that's why I weigh things up carefully before, and, for 35 years, relied on myself until I met my husband. Went to uni, did 2 degrees, always doing jobs and bettering and finding other careers and pursuits and leaving options open so I wasn't hemmed in. I would subconsciously think I don't want to get stuck like my mum and my grandma. Now, I'm sharing this with all of you tonight because many of you may see or hear me in media and also know that I published my book earlier this year. But you need to realise that for all of you that may watch this, that may be experiencing some form of domestic violence, in the last year, the conversation has moved from the alcohol and the domestic abuse and the assaults to the financial control, the social control, not allowing people to catch up with things. But I want you to realise that you might look at me tonight in the suit and made up and things, but you need to realize, every single one of you watching and listening to this, that 95% of people that you see struggle daily. The thing is, you just don't see the struggle that they're going through when you see them, because they put on a brave face. And that's different from hiding things. That is something that, especially as women, we just get on and we do it. Those of you that are watching that are mothers, or perhaps your grandmothers in charge of your grandchildren, you've just got to get on and do it. They often say that until you've had children or you've looked after children, you realize what you didn't know before. So what I want to say to people is, things don't come easily to people. Everyone has got a special gift in this world, but things don't come easily. You have to work hard on yourself, not just working hard to earn money to support yourself, but you have to work hard on yourself to always be trying to do the right thing. And sometimes it can take years to see the efforts that you actually put in come to fruition. It doesn't just happen overnight. It's not like it is on TV. It can take years and years. So in life, what I always say to friends and to people that I deal with, I say, look, it's not the set of cards that you're dealt. It's how you deal with that set of cards. You don't fall back into bad habits if you have a rejection, because rejection helps build resilience. It actually helps you work out the right from wrong. I still have 25 rejection letters from pursuing a journalism cadetship around Australia. And I remember at the time, I kept them because a friend said, one day you're going to get that break and you'll look back and you'll have a little cachet of letters and you might inspire someone with a talk not to give up. So it's funny tonight how I'm giving a talk. I've had so many funny situations where jobs have been promised and then the person who's promised it has been fired or the company's closed. But the one thing I always say to people is, try not to take things personally. It doesn't mean that you go and turn to addictive substances. This is all part of life. I ran several courses in Melbourne for people that wanted to get into television or radio, not realizing how difficult it is and the work that has to be put in. And what I used to say to them is, if you're like me, 5'10", brunette with brown eyes, and in their mind, they're wanting someone who's 5'10", blonde hair with blue eyes, you can't change who you are. If you don't get hired by a company, turn it around. It's the company's loss, not yours. Because you know what? You are going to get that opportunity down the track. And when you get that opportunity, you'll look back and you'll think, aha, that's the reason why I didn't get the job. We talk about resilience nowadays, and I'm really sad to see that so many teenagers, 20s and 30-year-olds that you would think would have this instilled in them by educational institutions or their families, they just crumble. They don't realize that rejection is a part of life. Rejection is a part of life so that you can then share the good news story when you actually get it. And it should make you stronger. It should make you believe in yourself and say, listen, I've got something to prove here. If you don't want me, someone else will. And it's the same with personal relationships as well. Don't compromise. Don't compromise your values. If you're not going to be treated properly by someone, you have to walk away. Right? You have to, because deep down it's not right. So I tell my kids, you have to tailor your message to various age groups. I tell my kids, every football, cricket or netball game you play, you are not going to win. It's different going out wanting to win. Every team wants to win, but there can only be one winner out of the game. Put it behind you, learn from what went wrong in the game, and do better next week. There's always another game. And I want to say to people tonight that you have to realize that timing is everything, and everything in life happens for a reason. And it's often not until it happens that you realize what that reason was or is. So you got to keep trusting yourself to continue putting the strategies in place that you've learned during your Path of Hope interactions. And you've got to realize that people do care about you, because by caring about you, they want you to be able to care about your children and change your course in life to show your children the right way, so that your children's chances of going off course are minimized. Now, I'm saying are minimized. There are no guarantees in life, so you might do everything right and your kids may still go off course. However, you're going to give them a pathway and a strategy to minimize their chance of going off course. And at least, it's a start with whatever they may choose to do. So I want to say, the very fact that a lot of you may have reached out to allow Path of Hope into your life is the fact that you realize you are a person in your own right and you don't need to be defined by a man. I know it's easy when people say, oh yes, but I wouldn't be able to afford X, Y, Z if I wasn't in this relationship. The thing that I would say to you is you can't afford to stay in a relationship like that, because the chances are you'll end up 6 foot under, or there'll be stuff done to you and your children or your family. Nothing is worth that. Nothing is worth that at all. And that's why you've got such a marvelous organisation like Path of Hope. You've got Rebecca, who is such a hands-on person. You've got Rotary International as well. There are so many programs and things in place, but it's not an overnight fix. It's not an overnight fix. It's like someone wanting to give up smoking. Very few people can go cold turkey. My sister-in-law smoked 3 packets a day. After 10 years, I got her down to 1.5 packets a day. It's just about taking those positive steps to try and improve the outcomes that you've currently got. So you don't need to be defined by a man. The same way, you don't need to hate all men. You need to realize that they're very valuable in people's lives. They play a very important role as dads and as stepdads. However, as a mum and as a woman, you know the right behaviours that you and your children should be subjected to, and you know when to walk away. And just the very fact that it is acceptable now to talk about domestic violence in the way that it has been, very sadly, it's only become acceptable because there have been some incredibly highlighted cases in the media, which has taken courage. I can tell I've been in the media 25 years. 25 years ago, domestic violence was not talked about. Even when the White Ribbon campaign came out, that was just a massive eye-opener because, a lot of people, number one, don't realise that they're caught. They're caught in this bind that what is happening to them is domestic violence. And a lot of men, if they've perhaps come from domestically violent households themselves, while we like to think they should recognise it, the chances are they're just replicating the behaviours. So it's part of what my book, Step Parenting with Purpose, is about. It's about breaking cycles and changing the course of things so that things can be minimised for generations to come. So, yes, I mentioned in my book, Step Parenting with Purpose, and I know that Rebecca may well have a little thing. It's there with me, but I sent her a little PDF before. So how this ties in with the speech tonight? Well, I've been a step parent for 15 years, and I say that this is the book that I wished I had had 15 years ago when I began my step parenting journey. Notice how I call it a journey, because we're all on a journey for life with whatever we do. So I wrote it because it needed to be written. It needed to let people know that they are not alone, and to remember that in terms of family dynamics and splits, co-parenting or shared parenting with a high conflict ex is not co-parenting or shared parenting at all. It's merely replicating the dysfunction. And this ties in with women being subjected to that cycle of domestic violence. Putting up with high conflict behaviour is not being in a relationship at all. It is just replicating a very dysfunctional set of events which will replicate. I saw it with my mum, saw it with her mum. I've seen it with my mum. I'm happy to say I've broken the cycle, but it's amazing how when you're away from a situation, you look in, you can provide insights. I waited 15 years to write the book because my stepchildren are now 26 and 25. So I became their stepmom when they were 10 and 11. And I didn't want to write a reactionary book. I wanted to write what I call a retrospective book. So insights, things that have happened. And it's the same with everything. Those people that are lucky enough to have, followed through with what Path of Hope have shown them, and they've created a new life, probably look back at the cycle that they were stuck in, and they probably don't even, they recognise themselves, but they just wonder how they put up with what they were being subjected to for so long. It's the same with step parenting as well, and splits. So just a little bit of trivia for you. When I talk about resilience and the set of cards that life deals to you and how you deal with them, my book was launched just before the COVID-19 shutdown. It was lovely. It went to #1 globally on Amazon in the Step Parenting Blended Families category. And I'm just delighted that everyone who bought it has actually contacted me or written a review saying how much they liked it and how much help it has been. It makes me very happy because at the end of the day, as I always say, we're all on the journey together in life. We can all learn something from someone every time. I'll tell you the interesting thing. Every book that you see on the shelf in a bookstore has been a year of actually planning to get it onto that shelf. Somebody explained it to me in publishing that it's a little bit like an airport with all the airplanes waiting to taxi. You've got to go through and work out your ISBN number. You've got to work out your title. You've got to patent this, patent that. You've got to design front covers. You've got publishers doing this. And 12 months goes by very quickly, but you have your plan, that is ticked off every week with what has to happen. So it was interesting. The book was launched 3 days before the COVID-19 shutdown. So I did my TV, I did some radio, I got a review. I'm thinking, this is great. I had talks planned, this, that, and what have you. And 3 days later, nothing. Absolutely everything was cancelled. So, people laugh and things. And those of you that follow me on social media, we have a very large chain of bookstores here in Australia called Dymocks. Well, there was a deal set up with Dymocks, but of course the deal with Dymocks fell away because people are on JobKeeper, JobSeeker. My publishing house had to stand down their staff and I had to drive down to Fremantle, and I have 800 books in my garage out of 1,000 books because they weren't able to be distributed because everything just shut up shop. The reason why a lot of authors that were launching during COVID were told to go down there was, what if there were fires? What if there was, attacks? No one knew. They were safer where I was. So it's quite funny. So, I actually had to go around and visit every Dymocks in Western Australia to resurrect and show my paperwork that, yes, would you like the book? Sadly, there was a head office franchise discussion that they have to have, and it's a bit of a chicken and an egg. Franchises can bring in any books that they want, but head office stores have to get permission from head office. Unfortunately, because the border has been shut between Western Australia and the eastern states, yes, an email can do it, but there's no reps coming across or anything. Anyway, the good news is, and it's very poignant that I'm sharing this tonight, is that yesterday I actually had a phone call with the national merchandising manager. So 4 months after COVID shutdown, and yes, she has sent out to all the Dymocks stores Australia-wide that they're able to actually stock my book, which I'm really thrilled about because I set up a website for my book during COVID because apart from buying it on Amazon, there was no other way for people to be able to buy it because the bookstores were shut. And now that they're opening up, there is still a lot of restrictions. So I just want to say I never gave up. Now, when you see my smiley face over my social media with my little thing in a Dymocks store, you do not see the tears that I've shed and the sighs and the I can't believe this. Because as I said, I really was only ever meant to have 200 books in my garage, not the 1,000, which luckily I sold a couple of hundred, but you see what I mean. So what I'm saying is everybody's journey is quite challenging at times, but you need to put your best foot forward as well, and you need to make the best of every situation. Anyway, I've diverted a little bit. So what I wanted to say was what my book tackles is probably a lot of what Path of Hope is tackling with you at the moment. It tackles the questions that people have but are just too afraid to ask. It helps you navigate your own sometimes conflicting emotions. It gives you insights into some of the more challenging step parenting events, as well as tips on how to engage and manage the ex. So it's a little similar. There's a parallel there that you're able to ask Path of Hope loads of questions about what is right, what is wrong, what should happen, what shouldn't. So, just like my book, Path of Hope does exactly the same for all of you. And, if you're willing to learn and if you're willing to want to make a change in your lives to help yourselves and your family, then you will find that there are people that are around to help you. So Rebecca is going to give my website link, which is KaraleeKatsambanis.com. But as I've just said to you, it's available from Amazon.com, Amazon Kindle, Booktopia, and if you're in Australia, Dimmock's Books, you just go in there and ask for it and they'll get it in for you. I say, and I saw that Rebecca saw in the blurb that she popped up for this lovely event tonight, that the step parenting blended family dynamic is much like a garden that needs regular maintenance, fertilizer, and attention. And so too is the step parenting family, which of course is a whole new world for many. A neglected garden bed is full of weeds and it can be transformed into a flourishing floral world, but it takes some work, time, and commitment to achieve results. I hope by now you're working out what I'm going to say next, because this is exactly the same principles for yourselves in your own situations as well. You each need regular maintenance and attention on yourselves and your family and your children. And, if you can do this, you can transform your lives and that of your families into a flourishing world. But it takes work, time, and commitment to achieve the results. And you know what? There may be setbacks along the way, but you can minimize those setbacks if you take note of what Rebecca and her team teach you about what to put up with, what is acceptable, what is able to be compromised on or negotiated, but and what isn't. It's just having those very clear guidelines. So one phrase that I use in my book is there's no one way to step parent in a step parenting family, but there is a right way to behave, and that is to treat everyone in the step parenting dynamic with respect. So it's the same with you guys as well. You must always make sure that you're treated with respect. And I'm sure with Rebecca and her team, the work, the courses, the wonderful tuition and intelligence that she and her team display to help you, you can ask her questions, because if you're coming out of a situation, you won't have those reference points just yet. And the worst thing you can do is just fall into another situation and replicate it. And what you've also got to realize is that a lot of men, they do pray that they can just pick up that vulnerability card that you have, which isn't your fault. And, you don't want them to replicate the same cycle that you've perhaps, been lucky enough to escape from. So there will be setbacks, but it's realizing that they're little setbacks. You believe in yourself and know that the decision that you've made to change your lives is the right one. So what I want to say is, I want you all to stay strong and stay true and stay on course. But deep down, you know what to do. And this is a quote that I have in my book, and it's in the pages. It's properly done with a picture. One day you will tell your story of how you've overcome what you're going through right now, and it will become part of someone else's survival guide. So I want you to remember that we all have a responsibility to carry that torch and to try and help others along the way. So I just want to say thank you so much. And I'm happy if Rebecca or anyone wants to ask me a question. I'd love that. But it is difficult to make those choices when life is easy. I'll share just one other tiny quick little story if I've got time, Rebecca, to do it. Many moons ago, I covered one of my very first cases in the courts of domestic violence. I was in my 20s on a paper, and this was a lady whose husband was very, very well respected, and she pulled out of the court action because she didn't want to give up the 3-story terraced house, and she didn't want to give up the twin BMW, and she didn't want to give up the kids' schooling. And she said, it's easier for me to put up with this because I'm going to lose my social face and my social circle, and I don't have anything. I got married when I was 20 and she was in her 40s, and she said, I've lived a life in society for 25, 30 years. She said, I wouldn't know what to do. And it was interesting because she ended up not going on camera or having the interview done. And she pulled out and she said, look, it's easy to put up with. She said, my kids will be 18 soon and they'll be able to go on their way. And I said to her, and in 25 years' time, what will you say to your children when they do what you do? And she stopped and she looked. And you know what? she made a decision to go back in there and press on with the court action. And she said, you know, you were right. She said, I thought I was just shielding my kids from seeing what was going on. But no, she said, I need to have two daughters that are strong and empowered, that have their own bank account, that have their careers, that can choose to work in a cafe if they want to, rather than needing to through necessity, that they have choices, they have abilities, that they know that there's another world out there. And, you know, she's one of the bravest people that I've met, because when you get used to a certain lifestyle, it is that they're almost the hidden victims of domestic violence as well, because, yeah, they know that it's wrong, but it's too difficult for them to take the step. But I was really proud that she actually did. Her life was never the same, but her life was a lot better because she was happier. And about 15 years later, she met a lovely man that actually did the right thing, and she realised what had actually happened to her. So any of you watching that are worried about giving up that special car or that house or whatever, your health, your mental health, your happiness, your example that you're setting to your children is far more important than having the latest Louis Vuitton or Gucci bag. It really honestly is.